Hello, and welcome to another episode of Been There, Done That. It's been a while since the last one. I'm Panav, a sophomore at Greenhill School and a part of the Lincoln Douglas debate team. As y'all know, it's February, so what better way to appreciate Black History Month than to talk to two Black leaders and role models at Greenhill School? Let's start with the interview of someone who really needs no introduction within the debate space, Mr. Aaron Timmons. So first of all, Mr. Timmons, could you please give me just a basic overview of who you are, what you've done in debate, and just in other parts of your kind of career?
How much time do you have? Name is Aaron Timmons. I've been doing debate for quite some time. This is my 30th year at Greenhill, and I taught at 3 schools previous to that. So I have been teaching all of my professional life and coaching as well. Had a lot of success with my students on a variety of different levels. My first 3 schools were public schools that were very, very different. First school had 220 people in it. I then graduated to a far larger school that had about 325, 350, and then I moved up here, and there was at the time 5A school, which is now a 6A school, and they had 2,000 plus. I then moved to Greenhill because I had an opportunity to do that. Had students compete and succeed on a variety of different levels. I've had students win national titles in policy debate, Lincoln Douglas debate, world schools as well. At the National Speech and Debate Association Championship, also had folks win at the NDCA, which is the National Debate Coaches Association tournament. So there has been a lot of success across the division. Also had the luxury of coaching a student who happened to be my son, who had 2 TOC championships and one NIE TOC championship plus another NDCA championship. So the point is they're not to flex, but rather had a variety of different students do very, very well across the range of speech and debate, also known as forensic activities.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you started at Greenhill about 30 years ago, but you've been doing speech and debate for much longer. And when you first started speech and debate, what was it like? What was the environment like? And what really got you into it?
That's interesting. I probably was in 4th grade, believe it or not, like decades and decades and maybe one more decades ago. And then they came in to try to recruit from middle school speech. And they were doing some monologues, and then there was some kind of a duo thing that I thought was really cool. Always been kind of a big guy, and the desire was, of course, to have me do sports in some way. Not by my family so much, but by the, school administration, coaches, things like that. Did a little of that, was pretty good at it actually, but really decided that this other thing was where I wanted to invest my time. So in high school, kind of solely put my time into competing in speech and debate. Initially, it was the more interpretation-based events. I then decided I wanted to do debate. And then there was a moment where I was told that's not really what Black people did at the time, that we are performers, we are entertainers. And I'm like, but I want to do this other thing. And then I just started and continued to persist, both as a competitor in high school. Wasn't very good, but I tried pretty hard. In college, wasn't very good, tried pretty hard. Decided to then teach, not very good, still probably, some would say, but I still tried really pretty hard. And so just kind of the story of my life of being told that I couldn't do a thing and then based on the way my personality works, that didn't really work for me. So I continue to push.
Yeah, your story in speech and debate is like a massive inspiration to hundreds of people getting into it. And what would you say kind of the evolution of that atmosphere in the forensics environment is? Like when you started teaching, I know it was a very different time than it is now.
It is. Very different, but also similar in many ways. For example, there were very, very few black teachers of speech and debate when I was a student and then when I became a coach. So there wasn't anyone, sans a couple people, that were able to be mentors for me, if that makes sense. I want to aspire to be like that person. Again, sans one person that taught in the Houston area that I can remember and attempted to emulate. I guess that's what I would say. A little different now in that there are more teachers of color who are coaching and whatnot. Not nearly enough. I think there are more students of color in speech and debate than there used to be. Not nearly enough. One of the, if I had to say in reflection to something I regret about my experience at Greenhill, and that would be not teaching more students that look like me, not to the dismay of not teaching other students, but at the same time, there is a skill set that I think that speech and debate brings to the table that would benefit many of our young folks of color, and they're many times pushed in a different direction. So it's kind of what it was, it's kind of what it is, and as I continue to do this, there is a goal to help what it should become, if that makes sense. And so that is one reason I want to work with and mentor young people who want to do this, but also younger coaches as well, to give them a path in regards to mentorship, some levels of power, insert air quotes, that I didn't really have.
Yeah, and when you started coaching, what were you really like the most hopeful about for the future of debate or just these kinds of events in general?
I gotta be honest, I don't know if I really had a perspective about what I wanted the future to be, but it was a thought process of, at the time it was do I want to be an attorney or do this teaching thing? One way, both things I would be pretty good at. One way I would make a whole lot of money. This way I may be able to impact some young lives, etc. And made the decision to teach. And I think that I've achieved that. But when I got started, it wasn't some grand, here is how I'd like to make the activity better, blah, blah, blah. It was just trying to figure it out, because you don't really know what you're doing when you first start teaching and coaching. It's learning with kids. And I'm not saying I'm not doing that every day now, but I would say I have more knowledge about how to navigate stuff that I would have, 20, 30 years ago or whatnot. So it wasn't really about how to make it better. It was navigating what was. And at the time, and it's still true, there were not a lot of people that looked like me. There were some doors that you really weren't allowed in, and if you knocked on them, people may stand there and let you look in, but didn't really give you access to that. So as I quickly figured that out, I figured out how I needed to know where the levels of who had the levels of power, what they look like, and how you could get access to it. What that then does is allow some more insight on how the whole thing works. Sometimes I say how the sausage is made, along those lines. I realize that's not probably a great metaphor these days, but it's the best I got right now. And it basically now, like I said, didn't have a real vision. Now it's a vision of leaving the activity better than I found it. And that means several things. It means people having access to resources that they really heretofore would not have. An example of that might be the Open Evidence Project that everybody knows is a thing. That was my idea. That,
Oh, wow.
there's a long story linked to that that I won't bore you with. But my idea was on the NDCA board, got that pushed. The wiki, my idea, kind of got that push. Big advocate of disclosure, things along those lines. Been doing it at our tournament for decades when people weren't even doing it or pushing it. Now it seems to be the norm. I could give some other examples, not to flex, but again, those are some examples of things that have done. Part of that also would be pushing workshops to be more inclusive in their staff in regards to who they hire, offering financial aid to students who are unable to have the access to that in the way that others who are more affluent may have access to that. Those are just a few of the examples of some of the things that I've done on kind of the broader scale. I could talk about a few more, but that kind of gives you insight, again, on if you know where the levels of power are and you're able to access them for good and not evil, then that seems to be value added, I think.
Yeah, and at GDS, one of your summer camps that you lead, you mentioned something that really stuck with me, which is debate is a conversation. And what are some of the ways over the past decades of you doing forensics that you've seen that conversation be utilized for something good?
I think it's used every day. I think for those that go, oh, I don't really want to debate or I don't really like that, they don't really understand at its core what it is. It is not, nor does it have to be only about trophies and wins. It can be that, but it is broader than that. It is about active listening to the other person. It is about research, particularly of an opinion or a side that you disagree with, and or a side that you didn't know really anything about till you are forced to learn a little bit about it. And competition just puts you in a position where you kind of have to figure that out, it seems to me. It gives you skill sets to find out where areas of agreement are, also areas of disagreement are, things you may be able to reach consensus about, things that you know that you fundamentally disagree about, and then ways to navigate that to reach an agreement to the extent you can. And there is nothing that I know of as a school activity that does that in the way that speech and debate does. It also allows you to tell your story, whatever that might be, in a way that very few, if any, activities do. So that is why I think it is a conversation. Even if you do a speech and you've done something to change the perspective of someone, share the lived experience of you or someone, I think that those things, again, are value added. And those are things that speech and debate seems to do.
Mm-hmm. And to cap it off, I know that the people that will have heard this, and I know that you have heard them over the past decades as well, that hear this and think they still haven't changed this perspective. They hear this and they still think this isn't something that a black man should be doing, or this isn't something that really has value in the world. So what would you say to those people?
Wake up and not be so racist. I guess is what I would say. I would say that structures of both race and class and how they're imposed on certain bodies are indeed a thing. But the idea of saying certain students who might look like the 50 plus year ago version of me shouldn't do debate and should just do sports, as an example, has a racial undertone and underpinning that unless you really understand systems of power and ideas of race and also class, you may not get, right? or say that debate is too hard for certain bodies, things that I have heard. You may not want to do that because there is a lot of reading that's involved. These are things that I've heard people say to young people that look like me. I would ask them to actually, those who have those beliefs, to have a conversation with someone who is somewhat trained in debate, to and then listen to see what the other side of that might be, because it's easy to push a narrative when it is a monologue as opposed to a dialogue, which goes back to the conversation part, right? Because we do a great job in society and maybe even our school of pushing a narrative and that turns into a monologue. But when anything is challenged, then that makes people kind of tense up a bit. And until we truly want to embrace not just diversity, but also anti-racism in the way that we think about ourselves and the world, we will never be as good as individuals, nor will we be as good as a community, because we're looking at things from one lens or one worldview.
And is there anything that you want to leave with people that are listening from an outsider's perspective? Some people that don't do debate or have kids in middle school looking to do debate, or just are looking at an activity and looking at someone who is almost undisputably one of the greatest to do it, and what do you want to leave them with from that perspective?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to toot my own horn that loud to say I'm that. I don't know if about Mount Rushmore of debate coaches, if that existed, but I've had some success along the way. If people had listened just a little more, I would wonder, what that would look like. But I'm not bitter. I'm just reflective. So I would like people to understand what debate is and what it's not. It is not, in its best form, arguing people down to the point where you don't listen. I think those that say that are not really aware of the power of what debate is. I also think it should be reframed into debate, dialogue, and discourse, which again feeds your point about it being a conversation. But what it does is give you the skill set to listen more actively as well as critically. There's a distinction between how one can listen. It allows one to be more empathetic about others who may have lived experiences that you don't, that may open up your eyes about you and how you may view those people, but also about the world as well, because you just may not know about some things. And debate brings things to the table that other activities really don't, not in the same way. And last but not least, it gives students a voice. And what I mean by that is, and it shows them how they can actively utilize that to understand and better both themselves and speak out for themselves, and also others who may not be as capable of speaking out. So you can be advocates for yourself, but also advocates for other populations and people as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Timmons. It's always such a pleasure to hear from you, talk to you, all of that kind of stuff. So thank you so much.
You're very kind. You're very kind. And I know I can be somewhat long-winded about some of these things, but this is an activity that I've devoted my life to. And anytime I have the opportunity to speak about its benefits, I try to avail myself to those opportunities. Thank you so much for your time and the willingness to hear me rant on about how good debate is. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and have a great day. What an insightful look into Mr. Timmons' perspective on race in the debate space and the necessity of debate in our lives. The next interview is with a senior from Green Hill, Jaden Watt, who broke multiple school track records, is a star player on the football team, and recently ended the TFA season with the most state points. Okay, so first, could you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Jaden Watt. I'm a senior at Greenhill High School. Um, I like to run track, do debate, play football. Senior year's been really fun, and I have two brothers, and I live in Plano, Texas.
So, what's your like? I know you went to Shepton before this, right? So, what's your experience been like? What's your experience been like in those two schools as someone that does debate, track, and football?
So at Shepton, it was actually a lot easier than at Greenhill, right? Because there was a specific time actually carved out for debate during the day, right? And football and athletics actually had like a specific block period. It was our seventh period during the day. So in terms of a scheduling conflict, it wasn't that bad. In terms of like the social aspect, it was always very interesting because when people saw me, they might have expected, maybe football or maybe track, but usually people don't expect, oh, hey, you do debate, right? So that was always very fun whenever people would be like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? I say, oh yeah, I have a debate tournament. And they're like, you do debate? That was always the first question. So that's always been interesting. And that hasn't actually really changed since I've been to Greenhill. I think a lot more people now, I guess, in terms of my immediate friends or around the school, know that I do it. So it's different. But going to a school like Shepton, where there's 1,500 kids per grade, it's not everybody's going to know that.
Yeah, and do you think your experience in debate as someone who's, black, do you think that experience has been like drastically different from your experience in track with football?
Um, yes, I think I'm sort of an anomaly in the debate space because there just simply aren't a lot of people who look like me. And so there's always kind of a surprised look when we were online when I'd pop in the Zoom call and it's like, oh wait, that's different, right? Or when I'd walk into a room. And there are often times that I've actually talked to people and they're like, I didn't think that this was going to be a very difficult round, right? And so people expect me to be good at football. People don't expect me to be very good at debate. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of I guess, the distinction that people make without even realizing. And that's kind of what I've experienced.
Yeah, and do you think that kind of expectation has like influenced your perspective on kind of what your place is in debate or in sports?
Oh, absolutely. In debate, really all it did was want me to drive to work harder because I wanted sort of to prove to people that I wasn't, everything that could be taken at face value. But I also wanted to show people like, hey, listen, just because I, look a certain way doesn't mean that I'm not a better debater than you and that I don't know what I'm talking about. And so especially in the senior year, it's been really fun because I tried to work a lot harder than I have in previous years. And I think my experience kind of differs from, football or track because when I go out there, like I said, it's almost like people expect me to do well.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, and in football and track, I know you've been super successful in like all three of those categories, but what do you think the reception has been to you as like in terms of coaches or like kind of referees, coaches, judges, the people around you on your team or against you? What do you think the kind of reception has been like in sports?
Um, it's always kind of difficult. There's always an element of when you're in a new place and you look like me, you kind of do always feel alienated, and it's something that you get used to. You walk into a classroom and there aren't very many people that look like you. You walk into a debate space and there's almost no one that looks like you. I actually say this often. I've debated against one black boy in the time that I have been a debater for 6 years. So that like should put in perspective. I've had over 150 debate rounds, and only one of them contained a student that looked like me. And so in sports, while it may not be as drastic as debate, I still sort of experience that same, reception that people have or that I get from people, where it's whether it be coaches or referees, there's always implicit bias, and it'll always show at times. It'll always come out, and that's difficult. but it's something that I've learned to try to work with and try to be successful while moving around those things.
Yeah, and do you think that that success has kind of changed your perspective on like what Black people's place is in sports and in debate? Or do you think you've always kind of had that perspective of I can do everything that's here and I can do it better?
Um, that perspective, I didn't always have that perspective, and I don't think I got it probably until I moved to Texas. But before that, I wasn't really big in athletics at all. In fact, I think I played basketball in my eighth grade year, but I don't even think I did a sport in seventh grade, and I played like golf in sixth grade. And so debate was always kind of the space for me. And like I said earlier, it always kind of has motivated me, and it's always, you know, I've always wanted to sort of make a way in those areas for people to kind of follow behind me, right? Like I feel like in terms of the North Texas debate setting, although I'm probably not pioneering or being like or am the first Black boy to do debate, but I do think that there are so few of us that when people see me, I do hope that I can leave that impact on, the people that I'm debating against, the judges, and everyone in the community at a debate tournament or, at a sporting event.
Mhm. And on those kinds of impacts that you want to leave, what do you think your main goals for the future going forward are in either sports or debate?
Okay. So sadly I don't think I'll be playing football competitively in terms of like in college or in at the pro level, just because it's something that I kind of decided I don't really want to do after high school. There's a possibility that I might walk on for track somewhere. I haven't really put much thought into it. But in terms of debate, as you know, the college LD setting isn't as, I guess fun as the high school LD setting. But they're all things that I sort of hold dear to me, and they're all passions that I've had and I've been able to cultivate over a period of multiple years because I've participated in all three for over 4 years. And so it's going to be kind of difficult for me to let those go. But if there was one to continue in, like, maybe debate, I really would see myself pushing hard since I'd be able to hone in specifically on debate and, trying to do my best in that area.
And do you think there's value in just regular people trying to go into a debate space, like whatever the debates may be? Do you think there's value in going into that kind of debate space and having those conversations?
Always. I think learning is always it may not be the most important step, but it is always the first step to, becoming, I guess, more of an aware person, right? Putting yourself in positions to where you recognize certain biases and you recognize certain constructs that you may be a part of or that even affect you, putting yourself in those positions where you can learn about them and contribute to positive change is always and contributing to positive change, the first step to that is learning about it. So I think that is why the debate space is actually so good, because without it, I wouldn't know about things like settler colonialism, right? It's just, it allows you to learn about all these abstract concepts that are so prevalent in our day-to-day lives that most people don't, have an opportunity to experience in the high school classroom. So it's always, I really do encourage that people, you know, at least try it. It's also very fun and competitive. So
Yeah, and as someone that's had all the experiences you have had, and as you're now going into college, is there anything that you want to say just to cap it off for everyone that may be listening?
um do everything that you want to do and try new things in high school, because in college you really are going to have to try to focus on one thing. And whether that be I want to go and try and play field hockey, or I feel like I should sign up for the spring musical, these are all things that schools like Green Hill have given the flexibility for us to do. So take advantage of it and enjoy it. When thinking about, hey, maybe I should take personal finance, go do it. Why not, right? Like, take advantage of the time you have in high school. And I know it sounds super cliche, but you don't really realize how good those experiences are, not even after you graduate, but when you're this late in your senior year and you're like, man, if I could do it all over again, I think I would.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of
It's
course.
awesome to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
course. Thanks, Pranav. Have a
Yeah,
good one.
have a good one. What an insightful interview from Jaden. Thanks so much to both of these people for helping join and just helping us see through the perspective for a little bit. And next month, hopefully, we can see some new, fresh perspectives. It is International Women's Day coming up soon, so we'll have something for that. And see y'all later. Bye bye.